has recently conducted a strike in northern Gaza, which people are saying has been reported as the deadliest attack on Gaza since the ceasefire, at the least. Now, this attack or this strike had, I believe, 7 deaths. So the fact that this is considered the sort of the deadliest thing talks about how sort of basically how I don't want to say pathetic, but pretty much sort of nothing has been done about Hamas in the pretty much since the ceasefire started. Now, technically, this is something you would expect in a ceasefire that nothing would happen, but what this means in this case is the fact that well, for one, the ceasefire hasn't really been going on since Hamas has been violating parts of it every single time. And also, the releases have stopped. There are no longer any hostages being released. There are some discussions. There was a new sort of proposal by Hamas that they would release the one American hostage as well as few bodies. I'm not sure if they specifically meant, I think there's like 4 American bodies still held in Gaza. I'm not sure if they meant specifically the American bodies or just sort of some bodies. But that was sort of their offer, one hostage and 4 bodies. Um, yeah,
And
basically the story is, yeah,
there's still 22, we believe, living hostages, possibly living hostages.
yeah. The fact that or the idea is that the rest of them are confirmed dead. So we definitely know at the most it's gonna be the 22 or so. Now the story is that some terrorists, we don't have a confirmation if it was specifically Hamas, but some terrorists were handling drones in the north of Gaza. Now, the story from the Palestinian side is they were just observing the distribution of the humanitarian aid and sort of how that is going. I should correct myself. It's at least 9 people were actually killed in those strikes. Now, Palestinians were also claiming that 2 journalists were killed and many more injured, which IDF is denying that they they think that there were no journalists there. My question is, how many journalists are there still in Gaza? The fact that in every single strike, somehow you also kill journalists. I mean, at this point, it's like every other sort of Palestinian is a journalist. But James, what do you make of this deadliest attack on Gaza?
Yeah, it's if this is the deadliest attack on Gaza recently, it's really not much. And as you point out, Hamas has been violating the ceasefire terms. Israel's been under continuous attack, in effect, since the ceasefire, apart from the fact that they're not giving names like they should. They're not proceeding with the next phase as they should. They're not, on and on and on it goes with their violations. So there's really, what we're doing here is we're playing a ceasefire game, which is a ceasefire in name only, with the hopes of getting out those remaining 22 hostages, or as many of them as possible. But look at what this has done, this pause. It actually, the numbers you reflect indicate that what Israel has done has significantly paused the attacks in Gaza. And that, of course, has given Hamas precisely the breathing space they need to regather, regroup, reorganize, resupply, catch their breath, figure out what Israel has been doing. Now, wait a minute. Yeah, innocent drones. If we were just sending up drones to observe, right? You'd say, hey, we're just sending up drones to observe. No, they weren't. Drones are deadly weapons of war. When you see Hamas drones heading in your direction, you do not wait for civilians to die. You attack back, and you attack back where the drones are coming from. And you point out journalists. Yeah, Al Jazeera is deeply embedded in Hamas. There's no question about it. On the other hand, we have every reason to doubt the number of journalists that they say are involved. Until further notice, I believe IDF. These weren't journalists. Besides, insofar as they are journalists, wait a minute. They're working side by side, happy to be there. They have taken on the risk when they're working with aggressive terrorists like Hamas who are sending drones towards Israel. No question about it. They could ask for, say, a third party to do drone observations if it was humanitarian aid that they wanted. No, this was obviously aggressive intent. Israel had to fight back. It was an act of self-defense. I don't believe anything Hamas said about it, but this being the deadliest attack, what it tells me is that what we have here is a huge breathing space that has been offered in recent weeks to Hamas. I understand they have new leadership organization, a committee of 5 or something that is now, and you can understand why they wouldn't want to have a single leader although there is one leader who appears to be stepping out, but you can understand why they would want a committee to sort of diffuse the danger, because you put a target on your back. But look, they're reorganizing. They've got new leadership. And the leader that they're picking is the guy who was the closest negotiator with what? Iran. So their envoy, in effect, Hamas's envoy to Iran is rising to the top of the pile, and Hamas, which is organizationally regrouping and now has a leadership council. Okay, so what this ceasefire has done is given Hamas a break, has given Hamas time to reorganize and regroup. And think of it, for the name of these hostages, who we can't even sure what condition they're in, whether they'll ever be released, where they are, even whether, although sometimes the other hostages have told us that some are still alive, or we've seen a couple of hostages still alive, so we can hope that they're still alive. But nonetheless, for the remaining hostages, we're willing for Hamas to regroup, reorganize for another October 7th attack. Apparently, IDF has gotten documents from the Gaza incursion, which have told us that this was their plan all along, to take hostages, take as many IDF soldiers hostage as possible. These are in documents that well precede October 7th. It was their intention. They know this. They know how we would react with hostages. They know we'd sacrifice ourselves and help them out, and that their biggest assets are hostages. We've known that now. We now know conclusively that that was their strategy and plan all along. So this ceasefire is a joke. This ceasefire is only helping Hamas. This ceasefire is setting us up for another October 7th. They've reorganized and have new leadership now, and that leadership apparently is particularly close with Iran. So I regard this ceasefire as a very, very bad thing, and can only mean more violence and more innocent civilians being killed in Israel.
Yeah, and so there were a few more things, but first, someone is asking, and this just came out, just saw it in the news. Do you have any comment on the Rubio expelling the disgraceful pro-Hamas South African ambassador? So it looks like, yeah, Marco Rubio or the government, the Trump administration pretty much said that the South African ambassador is not welcome to the US. Now, the only sort of problem I would have with it is that he is being singled out. I think there's about, I don't know, 150 countries that America should probably not have any relationship with.
Maldives, Brazil. I mean, there are nations that quickly come to mind. Hey, the president just met with the Irish prime minister a couple of days ago at the White House. I mean, not meeting with the Irish prime minister, so long as they take such a vicious anti-Semitic position on Israel. But you're right. There are several other nations.
I was about to correct you that I could see exception for Ireland as a part of sort of like Western NATO world. Then I realized, oh, Ireland is actually not in NATO, so we don't even have to worry about that.
Exactly, but so how many other nations have taken up the legal cause, claiming that Netanyahu? I would focus on those nations, and South Africa and Brazil really come to mind because they've taken legal action. And any European nation, whether they're in NATO or not, my friend, if they say they're going to arrest Netanyahu should he arrive on their shores, was it Norway and Belgium and other nations said, oh yeah, we're happy to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to our country. Those countries are not friendly to the United States. They are pro-Hamas. They're absolutely pro-Hamas. They're pro-October 7th, whether they admit it or not. They can use whatever kind of international humanitarian peace BS they want. And all of this reminds me of Ayn Rand on compromise. In any compromise, she said very famously, between food and poison, it is only poison that can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that can gain. Very famous Ayn Rand assertion. And I think it really is relevant here. when you compromise with evil, something you really have no common values or interests with, there is no possibility for negotiation or compromise. But the whole ceasefire talk, this whole negotiation over hostages, only shows us that Hamas is regrouping and preparing for another October 7th and another wave of hostages to be taken. So, for the sake of these hostages, how many more hostages must be taken? How many more innocent civilians must be killed? Um, that is the way I would look at this and frame it. But you're right. I'm glad that South Africa is facing some international pressure and punishment for their vicious stance on Israel. But as I say, there are other nations like Brazil or the Maldives. I can go down a list of nations that take a very hostile position towards Israel, and that's a hostile position towards America, in my view.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. Now, continuing, as I've said, there were a few more things. There was also a strike near Netzarim corridor, since three terrorists were killed near Netzarim corridor who were trying to plant bombs around it. So again, Hamas or the sort of the Palestinian part, because again, even in this fact, I'm not sure if it was specifically Hamas or any other terrorist organization that is sort of working in Gaza right now. And there was also a strike in southern Lebanon by the IDF. And to mention on that, apparently Donald Trump is losing patience over the lack of progress in talks between Israel and Lebanon, and has said that he would allow IDF to basically just do whatever it wants if nothing happens with the talks, which reminds me that should have been the stance he should have taken on Ukraine, that basically it should be, make peace, and if not, I'll release hell on Russia and help on Ukraine, not the
You
sort of the other
missiles so
way.
you can attack within Russia. Okay, well, I don't want to let that distract me for the moment. But the point is that we still have Islamic terrorist activity both in the south and the north. It's still going on, ladies and gentlemen. This ceasefire is not much of a ceasefire. The terrorists are still active. The terrorists are still there. Jihadist terrorists, whether they're Hamas or Hezbollah or affiliated organizations, I don't know who all was involved in these at this point. But the point is that these groups' goals and probably these groups themselves are still quite active. Um, and even in Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, there is still Islamic terrorism going on, whether it's directly by Hamas or some affiliated organization or some other organization. Anti-Israel violence, terrorism is still going on, even as Hamas is reorganizing. This is what we call a ceasefire, Daniel, in the Middle East, where terrorist activities in North and the South can still go on. Hamas can regroup, and my God, it shows the inadequacy of Israel and America's response to date. That's all I can really say at this point. But all we're doing is giving them breathing space, a chance to reorganize, a chance to organize more terrorist activities, apparently, both in the North and the South. And I'm glad there is something good, though, about what Trump said. He's losing patience. Well, I lost patience some time ago, but it's good to know that Trump has an outer limit and will let Israel do everything necessary to handle the situation, both in the North and the South, because clearly no one there is a good faith negotiator with Israel, and these negotiations are basically a sham.
We have a super chat from Ina Kaer. Thank you so much. She's asking, is Reagan's clarity to be credited for fall of Soviet Union? I don't think I don't think it's like the solo thing that basically when that
Right.
was said that there was like a clock. Soviet any sort of dictatorship is destined to break apart. You can't. Those are inherently impractical. They will fall apart at some point. What keeps them in power is Western support, both material when it comes to the first sort of decades of the Soviet Union, where we helped them materially, and during World War II, and then the sort of moral support or not enough moral opposition. I think sort of Reagan saying, this is an evil empire, and let the Mr. Gorbachev let this
I do credit
thing.
Reagan's moral clarity to some degree. The point is that in the decade that preceded Reagan's presidency, we had détente. Don't you know? We had we had cultural exchanges. excuse me, we gave them moral support, we did trade to some degree, and all of that détente was supposed to have made things all sunny and better. No, all it did was sanction and continue to support the Soviets, even as late as the 1970s. When Reagan came in, he started a military buildup that Russia could not respond to. Dictatorships are parasitical basket cases. And they never were 10 foot tall. The Russians never were 10 feet tall. And Reagan's response with a military buildup and talking about strategic defense initiatives, by the way, the technology has borne fruit in terms of the Iron Dome around Israel and so forth. But he came up with the idea of defensive weapons. And that was a technology beyond Russia's ability, Soviet's ability at the time to respond to. And more than that, his moral clarity. He went to Berlin and said, tear down this evil wall. He said they were an evil empire. And he allied himself with Poland's future leader and at the time a labor leader, Lech Walesa. He allied with Margaret Thatcher, the prime minister of the United Kingdom at that time. And so the good guys got sort of their act together in terms of moral decisiveness about the Soviets and a threatened military response. Ayn Rand had predicted decades earlier that the Soviet empire could fall if you just, without the loss of a single American life, if the West just had some moral backbone. But that is exactly the moral backbone that is lacking with Russia today. That is precisely the moral backbone that is lacking with Islamic terrorism in the Middle East, with Iran, with Hamas, with Hezbollah. We don't have the moral backbone to call them the evil monsters, the savages that they are, the representatives of an evil political and deeper philosophical position. These are racist mystics who want nothing more than to destroy Israel. If you listen to this guy who's being deported from the United States, he belonged to an organization that supported Hamas, and they called for the eradication of all of Western civilization. Not just Israel and America like Iran does, or Israel like Hamas does. No, his organization wanted all of Western civilization destroyed. So that if you morally sanction that, my friends, expect violence. That is what feeds the evil. The evil is not strong on its own. Trust me. You show some moral clarity, some military decisiveness, some real deterrence, and evil will fall on its own.
Bon is asking or saying, I wish I could remember the date Trump said all hostages must be released now, the date that has come and gone. Well, the first one was, I think, in December when he said, by my inauguration, all hostages have to be home. And then I think the sort of the second part was maybe it's now a month ago when he said, like, if it's not released by Saturday, then all hell will break loose. And then the most recent one was, I think, maybe like a week ago or so, when he again said that I think it was right after he met with the hostages when he
Each
said
time
that.
you say it, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker, doesn't it? Before you do, if you're not doing anything to follow up, I mean nothing to follow up, each time you say that, it becomes less and less effective. I mean, in the world of diplomacy, words are your tools, and your words become less. They become like Obama's red line in Syria. Hey, now you use chemical weapons. We're going to do. They use chemical weapons, and what does he do? And he said, oh, hey, if you let ISIS continue to grow, oh, he let ISIS grow. I'll give Trump one thing. He at least took out ISIS in Syria. The point is, though, that words to be effective have to be followed up with clear action. And insofar as Trump has at least 3 times to my memory said, or hell will break loose, we've let the dates go by repeatedly. So each time he says it without any significant hell to pay, those words become less and less meaningful. How do you define hell? More harsh language? It's obviously that is counterproductive to any kind of peace or getting rid of the cause of the monstrous behavior, which is what we should really be looking at. If you really want peace, ladies and gentlemen, you have to get underneath the whole thing. You have to get underneath the ideology that's motivating them and take out completely the organizations that are trying to enact that evil ideology. There is no substitute for that.
Someone is asking, does Israel need permission to act against monsters jihad? I think Trump gave his approval a long time ago. Israel is sleeping, I think. Can you agree? Well, sort of openly, yes, I think Trump is pretty much giving sort of free go to Israel. It's important to remember that on January 19th, day before his inauguration, Trump sent Witkoff to Israel and very much strong arming Netanyahu into taking the deal. Now, there are some talks that maybe there is some more push towards the ceasefire by the Trump administration, sort of less than is sort of like openly seen. I mean, he just had, well, they had this. I'm not even gonna remember his name because it doesn't matter. But I had this special guy who was supposed to be like the envoy for the hostages, special envoy for the hostages, and he called Hamas once, and then he got fired from his job. So apparently, Trump is trying to sort of directly talk to Hamas in some capacity. But yeah, there are sort of two things. Yeah, absolutely. All the moral blame at the end of the day is on Israel first and foremost. It's an independent country. It has to do. Then there is sort of like the secondary thing of what should countries that support the Western civilization sort of do. And in those regards, I think Biden's administration was lacking in that regard by stopping Israel in many cases. Not not in the way that the primary blame is on Biden, as I wouldn't say. I think the primary blame is still on Netanyahu as the prime minister and leader of Israel, but sort of the corollary blame or whatever you want to call that.
When a nation is viciously attacked, that nation's government has a moral responsibility to defend its own people, and it shouldn't require permission from anyone else to do whatever it takes. And Israel, at the time, in October of 2023, had sufficient military that they could have laid waste Gaza. They could have destroyed Gaza City by October 9th, okay, with the military they had at the time. So primarily the responsibility is always Israel's. Now, it is true what you say. Israel's chief supporter and ally, America, when Biden was leading it, did tie their hands, did limit them, did pressure them. That's gone now. And so, to that extent, I agree with the questioner in the sense that Trump has given Israel permission to do whatever it takes. And that really doubly puts it on Netanyahu. He will even have the American backing. But I can't help but still criticize Trump for the language he used. You don't use language like there will be hell to pay unless he's got something worked out with Netanyahu that involves hell coming down. And when you use language like that, as I say, the effectiveness of those threats diminishes. You get diminishing returns over time if you use language. He could have said, I've allowed Netanyahu to do whatever is required. He didn't. He said, there will be hell to pay, suggesting that even America would be involved in some action in the Middle East against these Islamists. But we have seen no such thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of like the biggest thing. Even when it comes to sort of rhetoric, you have to be able to sort of back it up. So even when, yeah, as I said, when Trump says, "Oh, hell will break loose," that's a good rhetoric. But if you cannot like stand behind it or support it in any way, then yeah, you cannot do anything. And again, it's not even something I was asking Trump to do. For the most part, I just want Trump to sort of say Israel can do whatever it wants, and then we can blame all of it on Netanyahu or all on Israel. I think even like I do
Now,
not expect. Yeah,
I myself do think that America has a responsibility to its own citizens when it comes to the Houthis, for example, stopping international shipping in the Red Sea, or the threats that Iran continues to pose to American interests, American troops there. I mean, as these Hezbollah affiliates supported by Iran have been killing Americans. October 7th, Americans were killed and taken hostage. And so there is some responsibility, I think, on the President of the United States' part to do something for God's sake. And we haven't seen any action or any real credible threat of an action from Mr. Trump himself against Iran, the Houthis, Hezbollah, which it does seem, I have always said, and I will continue to maintain, America should have long ago done something in Lebanon, long ago done something in Yemen, and more important than any of that, done something about the Islamic Republic of Iran, who's funding all of this.
we have a super chat from Rash Kar who says, "What is with Jewish people supporting Hamas in the United States? I can't get over whenever I see Jewish people supporting pro-Hamas protests." Well, in some regards, I do dislike this sort of uh, not necessarily tribalist, but sort of like an identitarian sort of thing. Like if you're Jewish, you have to support Israel. I think there is still some case for it that, you might not think that sort of you being Jewish is important or sort of like important character of you, which I think it shouldn't be. But other
I have
people who
something
want to kill
interesting.
you might.
Yeah, exactly. These what is it called? The Jews for Peace or something is the name of the group that occupied the Trump Tower the other day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I found out something very interesting about that group. You don't have to be Jewish to belong to it. You can be Christian, atheist, Islam, Buddhist. So they call themselves Jews for Peace, but I'm not quite sure how many Jews, first of all, are really in there. But you can always find someone in the persecuted ethnic group to stand up against even injustice for that ethnic group. For example, extreme pacifists. There are many, for example, Christian groups that are so pacifistic. They don't think you should, but they really take Jesus seriously when he said, submit to the evildoer, turn the other cheek, love your enemy, all that stuff. When you take Jesus seriously like that, as many Christians do, they will let you kill their own Christian sect and still say, bring it on, we'll turn the other cheek. And they'll claim it in the name of moral idealism. That's not moral idealism, ladies and gentlemen. That is a life-hating morality that allows the evil, that sanctions the evil and allows them to get away with all that they do. For someone of the same ethnic group to do it, it's directly suicidal. I would ask any Jews who were involved in that stuff actually to think about it for a while, because the people you're advocating for would happily kill you, torture you, rape you, mutilate you, take you hostage in their quest to, as the organization involved, Mr. Khalil, in its effort to eliminate Western civilization as such. That's what you're up against. And when you're up against something like that, the perpetrators of October 7th, or people who say they want to destroy all of civilization, you have to take it deadly serious. It is deadly serious.
And it's important to point out that even when it comes to sort of the Jewish people, you shouldn't defend Israel because you're Jewish. You should defend
Oh,
Israel because it's a Western nation that is fighting, hopefully fighting for the ideas that you also believe in. You bet that once Ukraine falls and Slovakia, becomes a Russian protectorate, then I'm joining a foreign legion. I'm not like staying to fight for Slovakia or anything in that
you're
regard.
absolutely right. I'm an atheist and I was born to Christian parents, and yet I've been doing this now, defense of Israel, for what, a year and a half now, very intensely. And because I know my interests and the interests of civilization are directly involved. But there is something particularly perverse and eloquent when you see like gays for Palestine. You know how they treat gays in Gaza. You know how they treat gays in Iran. So there is something particularly perverse when the victim group that these people would happily torture and kill is standing loud and proud for the organization that would kill them if given half a chance.
Now we're out of time. We had a few sort of more things to go over when it comes to there are some sort of memos that were released that basically how Hamas and people like Yahya Sinwar were sort of waiting for October 7 or were planning October 7, how pretty much their goal is not a one state solution where Jews and Palestinians live equally. It is a destruction of Israel. When they, I mean, just to put a few quotes, when Yahya Sinwar sent a letter to the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, he said, this imagined entity is weaker than people think. With Allah's help and with your support, we can uproot and eliminate it soon. So I guess Allah wasn't really on their side. But again, it's
I think he
eliminated
was hoping
soon.
for a more coordinated attack from the north and the south, and so maybe simultaneously by Iran that never came. But the point is, his plan was, his goal is, and it is the plan and stated goal of all of those entities to destroy Israel altogether and kill as many Jews as they possibly can. Never forget that. There is no compromise or negotiation with a group like that. If they want your complete and utter destruction, and they're willing to pull off on October 7th, there is no negotiating with them, ladies and gentlemen. And this pause, this ceasefire, only gives them time to regroup, reorganize, precisely what we're seeing here, plan the next October 7th, and plan the next batch of hostages that they will take.
We also have a super chat from Leon. Thank you so much. James, any last thoughts on this topic? We'll continue watching it, especially the sort of where will the ceasefire talks go. There are also some ceasefire talks in Ukraine, which we might talk about soon. Apparently, it looks like Putin is playing it pretty interestingly. He did say that he doesn't want to accept the ceasefire, but it's sort of like he just wants more assurances. He needs guarantees that he can invade Ukraine again. He needs the
Yes,
security guarantees for
exactly.
that.
If you don't allow me to change the government of Ukraine right now and allow me to invade anytime I want, because that would be the security, guarantees that. But a ceasefire? Oh yeah, his ceasefire will be just exactly what Putin needs right now to regather his
Well,
strength,
not actually,
reorganize.
because he is pushing right now. A ceasefire sort of would
Exactly,
benefit a bit.
you're pushing,
So
but also to reorganize in the surrounding area.
yeah, I
Ceasefire
think
only.
he wants to push Ukrainians out of Kursk, and then
Then we
a
can
ceasefire would be
negotiate
good for
about
him.
things. Yeah, you surrender all your territory that you've gained before we discuss any territory in the East over here. No, there is no good compromise between evil and the good here, ladies and gentlemen. Like Ayn Rand says, any more than there is uh, any benefit to mixing poison with food.
Well, with that, thank you, James, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective. Thank you again, and bye bye.
Be safe.
And I will be ending the stream in just a second, but my website crashed. So thank you again, everyone, and bye bye.